There is a quiet danger that destroys more lives than failure ever could, and most people never see it coming because it does not feel dangerous at all. It feels good, it feels safe, it feels like rest. It feels like the warm bed you do not want to leave, the routine you have followed for years, the version of life that requires nothing extra from you. This danger is called comfort, and it has convinced more people to give up on their potential than any failure, any rejection, or any hardship ever has. Failure teaches you something. Comfort teaches you nothing, because comfort never forces you to grow. It simply allows you to stay exactly where you are while life continues moving forward without you. If you have ever felt like your days are passing by without real progress, if you have ever felt a quiet dissatisfaction even when nothing is technically wrong, you need to hear this clearly today. You may not be failing. You may be trapped. And the trap is not poverty, and it is not hardship. The trap is comfort. It is the soft, padded room that feels safe, but slowly removes your ambition one day at a time. Comfort does not arrive announcing itself as the enemy. It arrives disguised as peace. It whispers that you have earned a break, that today does not matter as much as tomorrow, that you can start working toward your goals once conditions improve. And because comfort feels pleasant, you believe it. You relax into it. You let your guard down. And while you rest inside that comfort, your potential quietly shrinks, your urgency quietly fades, and your future quietly slips further out of reach. Here is the truth that most people discover far too late. Growth and comfort cannot occupy the same space. You cannot expand who you are while staying exactly where you feel safe. Every version of you that you admire, every successful person you study, every disciplined person you respect, became who they are by walking directly through discomfort, not around it. They did not wait for conditions to feel easy. They acted while things felt difficult, uncertain, and unfamiliar, because they understood something most people never learn. Comfort is not a reward for success. Comfort, when chosen too early and too often, becomes the very thing that prevents success from ever arriving. Stay with this message, because what you're about to hear can help you recognize the comfort trap before it costs you another year of your life. And it can help you build the kind of discomfort, tolerance that creates real, lasting transformation. Number 1. Recognize comfort as a slow and silent thief. Most people are taught to fear obvious dangers. They fear failure. They fear rejection. They fear running out of money. They fear public embarrassment. These fears are loud, and because they are loud, people prepare for them. They build defenses against them. But almost nobody is taught to fear comfort, because comfort does not look like a threat. It looks like relief. It looks like the end of struggle. It looks like something you have earned after a long day or a long week or a long year. This is exactly why comfort is so dangerous. It never asks for permission to take something from you. It simply makes staying still feel reasonable, and reasonable feelings are the hardest ones to fight. Think about how comfort actually operates in a normal life. You finish a long day at work and you tell yourself you deserve to relax completely. So the goal you wanted to work on waits until tomorrow. Tomorrow arrives, and the same justification appears again. You convince yourself that one more day of rest will not matter. One day becomes a week becomes a month becomes a year, and somewhere in that year, the version of you that once felt urgency about your goals has quietly disappeared, replaced by a version that has simply gotten used to waiting. Nothing dramatic happened. No single moment caused the change. Comfort worked exactly the way it always works, slowly, patiently, without resistance, until an entire identity had shifted without anyone noticing. I want you to understand that comfort is not evil, and it is not your enemy in every form. Rest matters. Recovery matters. There is a healthy place for ease in a well-lived life, but there is a difference between comfort that restores you and comfort that replaces your ambition. Restorative comfort refuels you so you can return to effort with more energy. Replacement comfort convinces you that effort is no longer necessary at all. The danger is not in resting. The danger is in mistaking permanent avoidance for temporary recovery. Most people never learn to tell the difference, so they label every form of comfort as deserved, and they stop noticing when comfort has stopped serving them and started controlling them. One of the clearest signs that comfort has become a thief is when your dreams begin shrinking to match your current effort instead of your effort rising to match your dreams. People do this quietly. They do not announce that they have given up. They simply start describing their goals with less excitement than before. They start saying things like, maybe it was unrealistic, or maybe this is enough, or maybe I am happy where I am. when deep down they know those words are protecting their comfort rather than describing their truth. Comfort is patient. It does not need to convince you all at once. It only needs you to choose it slightly more often than you choose growth, day after day, until the pattern becomes permanent. The first step in breaking free from this trap is admitting that comfort can be dangerous even when it feels good, especially when it feels good. Because pain naturally motivates you to change, while comfort naturally convinces you that nothing needs to change at all. Start paying attention to the moments when staying still feels reasonable. Ask yourself honestly whether you are resting to recover or resting to avoid. That single question asked consistently can save you years of your life that would otherwise be quietly stolen by comfort, disguised as peace. Number 2. Understand why your mind is wired to avoid discomfort. To defeat the comfort trap, you must first understand why it has so much power over you in the first place. Your mind was not designed to help you become exceptional. Your mind was designed to help you survive. For most of human history, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary risk kept people alive. The brain that hesitated before danger lived longer than the brain that rushed carelessly toward every challenge. This survival instinct still operates inside you today, even though the dangers you face now are completely different from the dangers your ancestors faced. Your brain still treats discomfort as something to avoid, even when that discomfort is exactly what would help you grow. This is why pursuing a goal often feels harder than it should. It is not because you lack ability. It is because a very old part of your brain is sounding an alarm every time you step towards something unfamiliar, uncertain, or difficult, even when that thing is good for you. When you consider starting a new habit, your mind immediately searches for reasons to delay. When you consider having a difficult conversation, your mind immediately searches for ways to avoid it. When you consider pushing yourself physically or mentally, your mind immediately searches for an excuse to stop. This is not weakness. This is biology. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you recognize that resistance is simply your brain doing what it was built to do, you stop interpreting that resistance as proof that something is wrong with you. You stop believing the lie that successful people do not feel resistance. They feel exactly the same resistance you feel. The difference is that they have learned to act despite it, while untrained minds treat resistance as a stop sign instead of a normal part of the process. Once you understand that discomfort is not dangerous, only unfamiliar, you can begin retraining your response to it. Every time you choose to move forward despite resistance, you send your brain new information. You teach it that this particular form of discomfort will not harm you. Over time, with enough repetition, your brain begins to relax around that specific challenge. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once required enormous willpower begins to require far less. This is exactly how people develop the ability to wake up early, exercise consistently, have hard conversations, or pursue ambitious goals without constant internal struggle. They are not naturally fearless. They have simply retrained their nervous system through repeated, intentional exposure to discomfort. There is something important to remember here. Avoiding discomfort does not make it disappear. It only postpones it, and often makes it larger. The discomfort of starting a difficult project today is almost always smaller than the discomfort of facing that same unfinished project months later, accompanied by guilt, anxiety, and lost time. The discomfort of an honest conversation today is almost always smaller than the discomfort of resentment that grows when that conversation is avoided for years. Comfort feels like protection in the moment, but it frequently creates a larger debt of discomfort that must eventually be paid, usually with interest. Once you understand that your brain's resistance to discomfort is not a personal flaw, but a universal human pattern, you stop waiting to feel ready before you act. You begin treating resistance as a normal companion on the path toward growth, rather than a signal that you should turn back. This single shift in understanding can quietly transform the way you approach every difficult decision for the rest of your life. Number 3. Identify the comfortable lies that keep you stuck. Every person trapped inside comfort has a collection of comfortable lies they repeat to themselves, and these lies are extremely convincing because they are designed to protect feelings rather than reveal truth. Comfortable lies do not feel like lies in the moment. They feel like wisdom. They feel like patience. They feel like reasonable decisions made by a reasonable person. This is exactly what makes them so dangerous, because you rarely question something that feels wise, even when it is quietly keeping you exactly where you are. One of the most common comfortable lies is the idea that you will start once you feel ready. This lie sounds responsible. It sounds like careful preparation. In reality, readiness is rarely a feeling that simply arrives. Readiness is usually built through the very action you are postponing. Waiting to feel ready before starting a business, before pursuing a relationship, before changing a habit, before pursuing a dream, often means waiting forever, because confidence is typically the result of action, not the prerequisite for it. The comfortable lie convinces you that waiting is wise when, in most cases, waiting is simply a more socially acceptable form of avoidance. Another comfortable lie tells you that you deserve a break before you have earned one. This lie exploits a true and important principle, the value of rest, and twists it into justification for avoidance. There is a meaningful difference between rest that follows consistent effort and rest that replaces effort altogether. Comfortable lies blur this distinction deliberately, allowing you to feel virtuous about choices that are actually keeping your goals frozen in place. A third comfortable lie insists that your current circumstances make growth impossible right now, but will make it possible later. This lie is particularly persuasive because circumstances are rarely perfect for anyone. There will always be financial pressure, time constraints, family obligations, or unexpected challenges. The comfortable lie convinces you that these normal difficulties are unique obstacles, preventing you specifically from acting, when in truth, almost everyone who has ever achieved something meaningful did so while juggling similar imperfect circumstances. Waiting for perfect conditions is often simply another disguise for staying inside comfort. A fourth comfortable lie claims that staying where you are is actually the safe choice. This lie ignores a critical truth, that comfort itself carries enormous long-term risk. Choosing to remain unskilled in a changing world is not safe. Choosing to avoid difficult conversations that could strengthen a relationship is not safe. Choosing to never invest in your health, your education, or your character is not safe. These choices often feel safe in the short term because they avoid immediate discomfort, but they frequently create much larger consequences later. Consequences that arrive disguised as bad luck or unfair circumstances, when they are often the delayed cost of years spent inside comfortable avoidance. The way to defeat comfortable lies is not through willpower alone, but through awareness. You must learn to recognize the specific phrases your mind uses to justify staying still. Notice when you tell yourself you will start tomorrow. Notice when you tell yourself you deserve a break you have not actually earned through effort. Notice when you blame circumstances that other people have successfully worked through. Once you can identify these patterns the moment they appear, you take away their power. A lie loses most of its strength the instant it is recognized as a lie. This single skill, the ability to catch yourself mid-justification, is one of the most valuable tools you can develop in escaping the comfort trap permanently. Number 4. Choose discomfort on purpose every single day. If comfort grows stronger through repetition, then discomfort tolerance must also be built through repetition. This is one of the most overlooked truths about personal growth. People often wait for life to force discomfort upon them through crisis or emergency, and only then do they discover unexpected strength. The problem with this approach is obvious. You should not need a crisis to access your own capability. The solution is to begin choosing discomfort voluntarily, in small and manageable doses every single day, long before life demands it of you. This single practice can completely transform your relationship with difficulty. Voluntary discomfort works because it teaches your nervous system through direct experience that you can survive and even thrive while uncomfortable. Each time you choose a cold shower instead of a warm one, each time you choose a hard conversation instead of avoidance, each time you choose an extra repetition when your body wants to stop, each time you choose to study instead of scroll, you are sending a clear message to your mind. You are teaching it that discomfort is not an emergency. You are teaching it that you can function, think clearly, and remain calm even when conditions are not ideal. Over time, this training generalizes. The confidence you build from voluntarily choosing physical discomfort begins to support you in moments of emotional or professional discomfort. The discipline you build from one small daily challenge begins reinforcing discipline in completely unrelated areas of your life. Many people misunderstand this principle and assume that voluntary discomfort must be extreme to be effective. This is not true. Extreme actions taken occasionally are far less powerful than small actions taken consistently. Waking up 15 minutes earlier than necessary, even when your body resists, builds the same internal muscle as waking up 2 hours earlier, just at a smaller dose that is far more sustainable. Choosing one slightly uncomfortable conversation per week builds the same emotional courage as choosing many difficult conversations all at once, without the same risk of burnout or avoidance afterward. The goal is not heroic suffering. The goal is steady, repeated exposure that slowly expands what you are capable of enduring without anxiety. There is an important psychological shift that occurs once voluntary discomfort becomes a habit. You begin to trust yourself in a new way. Previously, you may have avoided challenges because you were uncertain how you would respond to them. After repeated voluntary exposure to manageable discomfort, you develop genuine evidence that you can handle difficulty without falling apart. This evidence becomes the foundation of real confidence, far more stable than confidence built on motivation or encouragement from others. You stop fearing difficult situations as intensely, not because the situations have become easier, but because you have become someone who has proven repeatedly that discomfort does not have to control your behavior. As this practice continues, something remarkable happens to your perception of challenges in general. Tasks that once seemed overwhelming begin to feel approachable. Situations that once triggered anxiety begin to feel manageable. This does not mean you stop feeling resistance entirely. It means the resistance no longer dictates your decisions the way it once did. You begin to separate the feeling of discomfort from the meaning you assign to it. Discomfort stops meaning danger and starts meaning growth. This single redefinition, practiced daily through small voluntary challenges, can quietly transform a person who once avoided difficulty into a person who actively seeks it out, because they understand exactly what waits on the other side of it. Number 5. Stop confusing busyness with progress. One of the most deceptive forms of comfort is disguised as activity. Many people believe they are escaping the comfort trap simply because their schedule is full. Their days feel rushed, and their inbox never empties. They mistake constant motion for meaningful progress, when in reality, busyness can become one of the most effective hiding places from the discomfort of pursuing what truly matters. Staying endlessly busy with low-value tasks feels productive, but it often allows people to avoid the much harder work of facing their real goals, real fears, and real decisions. This form of comfort is particularly dangerous because it does not feel like avoidance. It feels like effort. Think about how easy it is to fill an entire day with tasks that produce the appearance of productivity while avoiding anything that requires real courage. Responding to minor messages feels productive. Reorganizing a workspace feels productive. Reading endless information about a goal without ever acting on that goal feels productive. Each of these activities can have value in the right context, but when they consistently replace the harder, more meaningful actions that actually move your life forward, they become a sophisticated form of comfort. You feel tired at the end of the day, which convinces you that you worked hard, yet your most important goals remain exactly where they were yesterday. The reason this pattern is so common is that meaningful progress almost always requires confronting uncertainty, vulnerability, or fear, while busy, low-value tasks rarely require any of those things. Sending another routine message does not threaten your self-image. Pursuing a bold goal, having a vulnerable conversation, or attempting something you might fail at absolutely does threaten your self-image. Your mind, always seeking to avoid emotional risk, will frequently steer you toward the safer, busier option, even when you know intellectually that it is not the option that matters most. Breaking free from this pattern requires brutal honesty about how you define progress. True progress should be measured by movement toward your most important goals, not simply by how exhausted you feel at the end of the day. This means regularly asking yourself a direct and sometimes uncomfortable question. If you removed every task from today that felt urgent but unimportant, what would remain? Would anything remain that actually moves your biggest goals forward? For many people, this question reveals an uncomfortable truth. Their days are filled with motion, but very little of that motion is connected to what they claim matters most to them. One practical method for escaping this trap is identifying your most important task each day before allowing any smaller tasks to begin. This single most important task should be directly connected to a goal that genuinely matters, even if it feels uncomfortable, uncertain, or intimidating. By completing this task early, before busyness has the opportunity to consume your energy and attention, you ensure that meaningful progress happens regardless of how chaotic the rest of the day becomes. This single habit can dramatically change the trajectory of your life because it protects your most valuable hours from being quietly absorbed by comfortable distractions disguised as responsibility. As you practice this consistently, you will begin to notice the difference between a day that felt busy and a day that actually mattered. These are not always the same thing, and learning to distinguish between them is one of the most important skills required to escape the comfort trap permanently, because busyness can hide inside your schedule for years, convincing you that you are working hard while your most meaningful goals remain comfortably untouched. Number 6. Recognize when relationships are reinforcing your comfort trap. The people you spend the most time with have an enormous influence on whether comfort or growth becomes the dominant pattern in your life. And this influence is often far more powerful than people realize. Relationships can either gently push you toward growth or quietly protect your comfort, sometimes with the best intention. A friend who discourages your ambitious goal because they worry about your disappointment is acting from love, yet they may still be reinforcing a comfort trap. A family member who repeatedly tells you that your current life is good enough may be expressing genuine care while still discouraging the very growth that would make your life more fulfilling. This is one of the most difficult aspects of escaping comfort, because the people reinforcing it are often not your enemies. They are people who care about you, but whose own relationship with comfort shapes the advice and support they offer. It becomes important to evaluate your closest relationships honestly. Do the people around you encourage your growth, or do they subtly discourage anything that disrupts the familiar dynamic between you? Do they celebrate when you take a risk, or do they quietly express concern designed to pull you back toward safety? These patterns are rarely obvious, because the people involved usually mean well. However, meaning well does not guarantee that their influence is helping you. Many people unconsciously prefer that those around them remain in familiar roles, because change in one person can create discomfort for everyone connected to that relationship. If you have always been the cautious one, your sudden pursuit of bold goals may create subtle resistance from people who have grown comfortable with the previous version of you. This resistance is rarely intentional sabotage. It is simply a natural response to disrupted familiarity. Recognizing this dynamic allows you to navigate it with compassion rather than resentment, while still protecting your right to grow beyond the comfortable identity others may be used to seeing. There is also the more direct influence of constant exposure to certain attitudes. Spending significant time around people who frequently express resignation about their own goals, who joke about giving up on dreams, or who treat ambition with sarcasm, gradually normalizes those same attitudes within you. You begin absorbing the emotional environment around you, often without realizing it is happening. This is why successful, growth-oriented people often deliberately seek out relationships with others who share similar standards for effort and ambition. They understand that surrounding themselves with people who treat comfort as acceptable will eventually erode their own resistance to comfort, regardless of how strong their personal discipline might be. This does not mean abandoning relationships that do not match your ambition level. It means becoming intentional about balancing those relationships with other influences that challenge and inspire you. Seek conversations, mentors, books, and communities that model the discomfort tolerance you are trying to build. Allow that influence to counterbalance any environment that unintentionally reinforces comfort. Over time, this balanced exposure helps protect your growth from being slowly eroded by environments that, while loving, may not be designed to support the version of you that you are working to become. Number 7. Replace comfort goals with growth goals. Many people unknowingly set goals that are actually comfort goals disguised as ambition. A comfort goal sounds like progress, but is structured in a way that requires very little discomfort to achieve, and therefore produces very little real growth. Growth goals, by contrast, are specifically designed to require you to expand beyond your current capability. And this requirement for expansion is exactly what makes them valuable. Learning to distinguish between these two types of goals is essential, because pursuing comfort goals can create the illusion of ambition, while actually reinforcing the same patterns that keep you stuck. A comfort goal often focuses on activities you already know how to do well. It feels productive because you are technically working toward something, yet the goal rarely stretches your abilities, challenges your identity, or requires you to tolerate meaningful discomfort. A growth goal, on the other hand, deliberately includes elements of uncertainty. It often requires learning a new skill, facing a fear, or risking failure in a visible way. The discomfort embedded within a growth goal is not a flaw in the goal. It is the very mechanism through which transformation occurs. When evaluating your current goals, ask yourself an important question. Does pursuing this goal require me to become someone different than I am today? Or does it simply require me to repeat what I already know how to do? If a goal can be achieved entirely within your current comfort zone, using only skills and behaviors you have already mastered, it may provide some satisfaction, but it will rarely produce significant transformation. Real growth requires goals that demand new capacities, whether that means improved discipline, stronger communication, increased physical capability, or greater emotional resilience. This is why many people feel busy and accomplished while still feeling unfulfilled. They have been achieving comfort goals for years, checking boxes that require little discomfort, while quietly avoiding the larger, more intimidating growth goals that would actually transform their lives. There is a useful practice for restructuring your goals to ensure they include genuine growth. Begin by identifying one goal you have been avoiding specifically because it feels intimidating or unfamiliar. This avoidance itself is often a signal that the goal carries real transformational potential. Rather than continuing to avoid it, break it into the smallest possible first action, an action small enough that it still requires courage, but does not feel completely overwhelming. This allows you to begin engaging with discomfort gradually rather than facing the entire intimidating goal all at once. As you take this first uncomfortable step, you will likely notice that the anticipated difficulty was often larger in your imagination than in reality. This experience builds confidence for the next step, and the next, slowly transforming an intimidating goal into a series of manageable actions. It is also important to regularly reevaluate your goals to ensure they continue to challenge you. As you grow more capable in a particular area, what once felt like a growth goal can gradually become a comfort goal simply through repetition and familiarity. This is a positive sign of progress, but it also means it is time to identify a new edge, a new area where discomfort can once again become your teacher. This continuous process, recognizing comfort goals, deliberately choosing growth goals, and regularly updating your edge of discomfort, creates an ongoing cycle of expansion that prevents stagnation. Without this process, even ambitious people can eventually settle into a new, more sophisticated version of the comfort trap, mistaking continued activity for continued growth. Number 8. Build an identity that values discomfort over ease. Long-term escape from the comfort trap requires more than occasional discipline. It requires a fundamental shift in identity, a shift from seeing yourself as someone who tolerates discomfort when necessary, to seeing yourself as someone who actively values discomfort as a tool for growth. This shift in identity changes everything, because behavior naturally follows identity. When you see yourself as a person who avoids difficulty whenever possible, your actions will consistently reflect that self-image, regardless of how much motivation you experience in any given moment. When you see yourself as a person who intentionally seeks growth through discomfort, your actions begin aligning with that identity as well, often without requiring the same level of willpower that was previously necessary. Building this identity begins with how you speak to yourself about discomfort. Many people unconsciously describe discomfort using language that reinforces avoidance. They say things like, "This is too hard," or "I cannot handle this," or "This is not for me." This language shapes self-perception over time, gradually convincing the speaker that they are someone who is incompatible with difficulty. A different approach involves consciously choosing language that reflects the identity you are trying to build. Phrases like, "This is uncomfortable," and "That is exactly why it matters," or "I am the kind of person who does hard things," may feel unfamiliar at first, but repeated consistently, this language begins reshaping the internal narrative that drives your behavior. Identity is also built through accumulated evidence, not through declarations alone. You cannot simply decide to become a disciplined person and expect that identity to feel real without supporting proof. Each time you choose discomfort over comfort, even in small situations, you provide evidence to yourself that the identity you are claiming is becoming true. Over time, this evidence accumulates into a stable self-concept that no longer requires constant motivation to maintain. You begin acting in alignment with discomfort tolerance, not because you're trying hard in any particular moment, but because it has simply become who you are. This is the same process through which any meaningful identity shift occurs, whether someone is becoming a reader, an athlete, a disciplined professional, or an emotionally resilient individual. The identity follows the evidence, and the evidence follows the repeated choices made daily, often during moments that feel completely insignificant on their own. There is a particular power in choosing discomfort during moments when no one else is watching. Public commitments and external accountability can certainly help in the early stages of change, but lasting identity transformation is built most powerfully in private. The decision to wake up early when no one will know if you stayed in bed, the decision to study when no one is checking, the decision to have an honest conversation with yourself when avoidance would have been easier, these private choices build a relationship with yourself that external validation can never replicate. This is why people with a strong internal identity around discomfort tolerance often appear remarkably consistent regardless of circumstance. Their behavior is not dependent on encouragement, recognition, or ideal conditions. It is dependent on an internal standard they have built through years of small, private decisions, decisions that, individually, may have seemed unimportant, but collectively created an identity capable of sustained growth long after motivation alone would have failed. Number 9. Use discomfort as a measurement of meaningful direction. One of the most practical shifts you can make is to begin treating the presence of discomfort as useful information rather than as a warning to retreat. Most people interpret discomfort as a signal that something is wrong, that they should slow down, change direction, or abandon the effort altogether. This interpretation, while understandable, often leads people directly away from the very paths that would create the most meaningful growth in their lives. A more useful interpretation recognizes that the presence of productive discomfort frequently indicates that you are moving in an important direction, precisely because growth, by its very nature, requires expansion beyond your current capacity. It is essential to distinguish between productive discomfort and harmful pain, because not all discomfort carries the same meaning. Harmful pain often signals genuine danger, whether physical, emotional, or ethical, and should never be ignored or pushed through carelessly. Productive discomfort, by contrast, typically involves fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of the unknown, or simple unfamiliarity with a new skill or challenge. This type of discomfort, while uncomfortable, does not indicate danger. It indicates growth. Learning to recognize this distinction allows you to respond to discomfort with curiosity rather than automatic avoidance. Instead of immediately retreating when you feel resistance, you can pause and ask yourself an important question. Is this discomfort protecting me from genuine harm? Or is it simply protecting me from unfamiliar territory that could ultimately benefit me? This single question, asked consistently, gradually transforms your relationship with difficulty. You begin approaching discomfort analytically rather than emotionally, which allows you to make decisions based on long-term value rather than short-term feelings. There is a practical method for applying this principle in daily life. When you notice strong resistance toward a particular task or decision, treat that resistance as a signal worth investigating rather than obeying immediately. Ask yourself what specifically feels uncomfortable about the situation. Often, you will discover that the discomfort stems from fear of failure, fear of judgment, or simple unfamiliarity, none of which represent genuine danger. Once you identify the specific source of discomfort, you can address it directly rather than avoiding the entire situation. This process transforms vague resistance into specific, manageable concerns, which are far easier to work through than an undefined feeling of unease. Over time, this practice builds a powerful internal compass. Rather than avoiding everything that feels difficult, you learn to move toward challenges that contain productive discomfort, while still respecting genuine warning signs when they appear. This compass becomes increasingly accurate the more you practice distinguishing between these two types of discomfort, allowing you to pursue ambitious goals with both courage and wisdom. People who develop this skill often appear unusually willing to attempt difficult things, not because they have eliminated fear, but because they have learned to interpret fear correctly. They understand that the presence of productive discomfort often means they are standing at the exact edge of meaningful growth, and rather than retreating from that edge, they have trained themselves to lean into it, understanding that this is precisely where transformation happens. Number 10. Commit to outgrowing your comfort every single year. The comfort trap is not something you escape once and never encounter again. It is a pattern that must be continuously recognized and addressed throughout your entire life, because comfort naturally expands to fill whatever space you allow it to occupy. As you grow, your comfort zone grows with you, which means that challenges that once felt intimidating eventually become familiar and easy. This is a sign of real progress, but it also means that staying within that expanded comfort zone indefinitely will eventually create the exact same stagnation you originally worked so hard to escape, simply at a higher level than before. This is why lasting freedom from the comfort trap requires an ongoing commitment to deliberately outgrow your comfort, not just once, but continuously, year after year, for as long as you want to keep growing. This commitment requires regular reflection. At least once a year, it becomes valuable to honestly examine your life and ask whether you have meaningfully expanded your capabilities, your courage, and your character over the past 12 months, or whether you have simply repeated familiar patterns within an expanded but ultimately static comfort zone. This reflection should not be approached with self-criticism, but with honest curiosity. The goal is not to judge yourself harshly for periods of stagnation, but to recognize them clearly enough to make different choices moving forward. Many people avoid this kind of reflection because it can feel uncomfortable to admit that an entire year passed without significant growth. Yet this very discomfort is valuable, because facing it honestly is far more useful than allowing years to pass unexamined, only to look back with regret much later in life. As you commit to this ongoing process, it becomes helpful to identify specific areas of life where comfort may currently be limiting you. This could involve your career, your physical health, your relationships, your financial habits, your creative expression, or your emotional resilience. In each of these areas, ask yourself a direct question. What would the next level of growth require of me, and am I currently willing to pursue it? If the honest answer is no, that resistance itself becomes valuable information, pointing directly toward the specific form of discomfort you most need to address. This process of yearly recommitment prevents the kind of subtle, long-term stagnation that often goes unnoticed until significant time has already been lost. It is worth remembering that the version of yourself capable of achieving your next major goal does not yet fully exist. That version of you is built specifically through the discomfort required to grow into new capability, new skill, and new strength. Avoiding discomfort indefinitely does not protect that future version of yourself. It prevents that version from ever coming into existence. Every year you choose to expand beyond your current comfort is a year that future version becomes more real, more developed, and more prepared for opportunities that would otherwise remain completely out of reach. This ongoing commitment to outgrowing comfort, repeated consistently throughout an entire lifetime, is ultimately what separates people who experience continuous transformation from people who experience only a single burst of growth, followed by decades of repetition. The comfort trap will always exist, waiting patiently for moments of fatigue, uncertainty, or fear to pull you back toward ease. Recognizing this pattern permanently, and choosing again and again to walk toward growth instead of retreat, is what ultimately determines how far your life is able to go, and how much of your true potential you allow yourself to finally experience.